Let's talk about cocoa and chocolate. Yummy, yummy. I mean, you'll probably know the basic types: white, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, white chocolate. Here, let's now. You may want to pause the video here and go get a piece or two more of your favorite chocolate, just to ensure your brain is starting down the proper path to associate good things with learning. But all right, so chocolate is made from cocoa beans, which are a commodity much like the others we've been studying in this class. The growers get very little of the money ultimately paid by consumers. The industry structure, there are a few major producers who focus on making an extremely consistent product that is good, but at a very competitive price. And then there are small artisanal producers who make a premium product, and they're usually leaning into the variability of that final product. Different beans sourced from different areas can exhibit a range of flavors, and that's the point for artisanal. If you're one of the big folks trying to make a consistent product, though, that's a pain. That's a problem, not an opportunity. Then there are the big intermediate producers that they take the product from the farms in developing countries, and they get it to the producers, generally in developed countries. And also, in common with some of the other crops we've been discussing, chocolate prices have recently exploded. And there are a lot of reasons for the price hike. Climate change is one of them, but not the only one. Now, as prices rise, the big producers have a range of options of how to respond. They could just pay more for the inputs and not raise the price of the output, just accept a lower profit margin and absorb the increased cost. Or they pass along the price increases in the inputs in various ways. They can just directly raise the price of the products. They can reduce package size, called shrinkflation, make that chocolate bar just a little bit smaller. And or they can substitute just lower quality inputs, might change the taste a little, hopefully, not really perceptible. But all right, so let's step back a bit and get in some details about cocoa. Now, I'll note some people insist that the plant should be called cacao, not cocoa, until it becomes a bean, whatever. I'm not going to get too fancy about that. We have enough names going on here. So the plants, whatever you call them, originated in the rainforest in what is now Ecuador. And humans were consuming those at least 5,000 years ago. People traded the cocoa pods and expanded planting and trade networks throughout the western part of South America and up through Central America and the Caribbean. That ancient trading is why there was a lot of uncertainty about where cocoa originated, because it ended up so widespread. Now, the Aztecs were famously quite fond of the drink. They made it from cocoa pods, they mixed it with vanilla and chile, both. They frothed it up, and it said the emperor only drank the froth. Spanish learned about cocoa when they came in and conquered, and they introduced it to Europe. It became much more popular when it was combined with sugar. If you've ever tasted baking chocolate, you'll know sweetener is a kind of important part there. Eating chocolate became really popular in Europe around the same time as early botanical classifications. So the chocolate plant was given the name Theobroma, which I'm sure Angelo can pronounce much better than me. Sorry, it's classical Greek. Food of the gods, because, obviously, what else would it be called? Anyway, the trees that grow cocoa need a lot of consistent warmth and lots of rain, so they're usually at low elevations within about 20 degrees of the equator. Most cocoa production is using the Forastero species, has a higher yield. Specialty coffee is Ave Criolla. The flowers, interestingly, are not pollinated by bees or something, but by biting midges. The trees grow the pods right on the trunk, as you can see in that picture. Each pod is like a pound when it's ripe, almost a foot long. Mostly has pulp, but it also has seeds, and the seeds are what become the chocolate. Now, there's actually some hypotheses that people originally wanted the pulp, which they'd ferment into a boozy drink, and only later found a use for the seeds. Now, though cocoa began in the Americas, most production is now in West Africa. Ivory Coast grows almost 40% of world production, and then Ghana makes another 30%. Those are the biggies there. To make cocoa, again, like the crops we've been discussing, fermentation is important. There are a lot of microorganisms that contribute towards the taste that we value and appreciate so much. The pods are broken open, the beans are separated from the pulp, and then dried and roasted. Once roasted, they can be stored well and shipped around the globe. Now, in processing, the shells of the cocoa beans are removed, leaving cocoa nibs, which you can sometimes buy in a store in that form. But typically those nibs are going to be ground into what's called cocoa liquor. It's not actually liquor, it's not booze, it's just what it's called. I guess calling it cocoa mash or something wouldn't be good for marketing. And that's pressed to extract cocoa butter, which again, not actually butter, no dairy in it, it's vegan. It's just what it's called because it kind of looks like, yellow and creamy. It's pressed out in a similar way to, how olives are pressed for olive oil. Now those fats melt above room temperature, which is why cocoa is solid when stored, but melts in your mouth. There are slightly different forms of the fats when they crystallize. There's a good deal of complex biochemistry going on there. The different forms have slightly different melting points. There's really tremendous scope for artistry. The remaining solids are dried and ground into powder. Now, the reason for separating cocoa butter from cocoa solids is because the different confections will use different ratios. The cocoa powder is generally quite acidic, and so we have the so-called Dutch process that'll add some alkaline of various sorts to bring the pH of the result closer to neutral. That cocoa is then ground up a very long time, called conching. Grinding can go on for days. It's entirely an industrial process. There's just no way a human would mix for so long. It's about the machines. And that's why chocolate is so good to eat really only developed in the late 1800s after the Industrial Revolution. To make chocolate, you add sugar, and in many cases milk products. Now there's some caffeine in chocolate, around just about a fifth of the amount in a cup of coffee, so it's not a major contributor. It contains theobromine, which you can recognize theobroma from the scientific name of the plant. It's food of the gods again. And theobroma has similarities to caffeine in terms of its structure. That theobromine is what's toxic to animals because they process it so much slower than humans do. Getting back to the common forms of chocolate, dark chocolate includes cocoa powder and cocoa butter, different ratios depending on who's making it, along with sugar again, different ratios. I'm not giving recipes here. There may be other ingredients, but these are just the principal ones. Milk chocolate adds some dairy products to give a more mellow taste, maybe stretch the more expensive ingredients a bit. White chocolate doesn't use cocoa powder, just the cocoa butter with dairy and sugar. Some cocoa butter can have really good flavor, but a lot of white chocolate products are just using the cocoa butter as a source of fat. They're not really getting much taste from it. And then baking chocolate omits the dairy and the sweetener entirely. It's not really for eating on its own. People do, but... So here's the price of a ton of cocoa beans going back to 1980. You can see that prices were really pretty stable till 2024 when, bam, exploded. Prices had kept, $2,000, $3,000 a ton, pretty stable in a range. And no, those are nominal prices. Everything else getting more expensive from inflation. So 2000 in 2020 didn't buy nearly as much as 2000 in 1980. The U.S. inflation since 1980 means $1 in 2020 bought only about a quarter of what $1 in 1980 could buy. But then in 2024, prices went above $10,000 per ton, which is a big spike. But that price is basically similar once we adjust for purchasing power to what the price was back in the 1980s. So here I've blown up focused on just the 10 years from 2012 to 2022, just to get an idea of what most growers had got used to seeing. From mid-2013 almost into 2016, prices were often above $3,000, but they sagged a lot into 2017. Then there's some stability around 2,500 until, boom, that price spike caused by poor harvests. And, markets are really quite volatile now. These prices are from ICE, that's Intercontinental Exchange, that's the futures price. The biggest contracts are traded in London and New York, and often actually reflect the relative valuations of the British pound. That's GBP, Great Britain pound. So, generally the relative value of the currency is going to impact the cocoa price. Their contracts, producers can lock in a price soon, and sellers can sell, lock in a price, looking forward. So contracts March, May, July, September, December. A single contract is for 10 metric tons of beans, just to give you a sense of, the size of these markets. Beans from certain countries, let's say Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Togo, are worth more. Beans from Ecuador, Cameroon, Colombia, New Guinea, Venezuela are a smaller premium. Beans from Bolivia, Haiti, Indonesia, usually from one island, Sulawesi, and Malaysia, they don't get any premium. Now, many contracts between sellers and producers will reference the ICE futures price, even if they're not actually traded on that platform. It's pretty common. People just say, yeah, we'll look at the price quote and use that. The big producers obviously appreciate the ability to buy beans in the future, to lock in a price. And, the producers, often long before harvest, they lock in a price ahead of time. That allows folks to plan ahead. It's a really important part of the agricultural process.